Here we go. Welcome back to our second segment on Ask Me Anything About Grief, where we talk about grief, loss, and healing. I'm Margaret Murphy, and we're continuing our special series in honor of Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. Each week, we're dedicating our episodes to the topic of grief, providing support, insights, and hopefully a sense of community for those who need it the most. In our last episode, we introduced the concept of grief and discussed some of the early emotions and stages. Today, we're going to go a little deeper, exploring the complexities of grief, including how it can affect relationships, daily life, and the long-term journey of healing. Grief is a deep and complex emotional response to loss. It can manifest in various ways, including sadness, anger, confusion, guilt, numbness, or even relief. People grieve not just because they've lost someone, but because they've lost a connection, a role, a future they envisioned. Grief is personal and varies significantly from one person to another, as well as by culture, belief system, and the nature of the loss. So joining me again is Laura Aguilar of the Center for Reproductive Loss. Today we'll be discussing Worden's task of mourning. So Laura, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me again.
It's so good to see you. I was just, thinking let's just jump in and start talking about this because I think it's a very fascinating concept, this Worden's task of mourning. So can you give us a brief introduction about what it is?
Yes. So Worden is a psychologist, and he's known for his contributions to the field of grief and bereavement. He's best known exactly for the 4 tasks of mourning, and what they do is that they really provide like a framework for understanding the process of grieving. I want to make like a distinction because like maybe people could be like, why not talking about the 5 stages of grief, right? Yeah. Elizabeth, I don't remember the last name, but what I like about the 4 tasks of mourning is that Worden's framework helps us understand that mourning is a process that can be navigated in meaningful ways. What I like about him is that it's also, the importance of maintaining this connection with the deceased, but also adjusting it to our way of life, to moving on. Because it's never like, oh, my loved one is deceased. It's never like, okay, now let's move on. It's about like how to live with that death, especially with pregnancy loss. And I feel like another thing that I really like is that it helped individuals like actively engage in their mourning process. And this can promote, of course, healing and personal growth. But I feel like it also makes us like there's a specific objective for each task. And I really like this because I feel like it helps us feel more in control of our grief process.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. So the first one, the first task of mourning for him is the accept the reality of the loss. So basically, this task involves recognizing and accepting that our loved one is gone, and trying to manage all these difficult emotions, and trying to move on with this overwhelming that we are feeling, right? Because oh my God, like I've never felt so overwhelmed of all kinds of sorts of feelings because you never get one. That is something very, very fun. You never get one feeling, even though you're happy. You're not just happy. Maybe you're happy and excited, right?
Yeah.
And especially with pregnancy loss, we are sad, we are angry, we are anxious, we are afraid, right? So this whole lot of overwhelming feelings come over us, and it's really hard to be accepted, right? Intellectually and emotionally, specifically.
Right.
And one of the things that is very interesting in this, that I would say, is that in accepting the reality of the loss, it involves that people around us also acknowledge that loss, right? And there is a term coined by Kenneth Doka from the 80s, I think, and it's called disenfranchised grief. And he says that disenfranchised grief is this kind of loss that is not or cannot be openly acknowledged or socially sanctioned, or publicly mourned.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know about your experience, but it makes me, remember all those comments that I got when I had a miscarriage. Like it's better that it happened now and not maybe later when the baby would be bigger, or
Mm-hmm.
things happen for a reason. He's in a
Mm-hmm.
better place, and
At
you
least you can
know,
get pregnant. That, I mean, I heard that when
yes,
I had my miscarriage years
yes,
ago. And I actually, everything that you just said, I had all of those comments as
yes,
well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I had one like, well, at least you have other children. You can
Yeah.
be happy about that. And you're like,
Yes. Yeah.
and it's so, it's really, because intellectually they make sense, right? Yes, I have other children. Yes, I can get pregnant. But emotionally, for the person who's grieving, it's like terrible,
Yeah.
right? So I think that this is a very important task, and just to realize and accept that, okay, I had a miscarriage, and everything that involves with her, right? Like,
Right.
because it's not always one loss that we suffer. It always comes with secondary losses. And it's just, like I said, very overwhelming. So I feel like accepting this, okay, I lost my baby. I lost my hopes of
Hmm.
parenting this baby,
Yeah.
because it's not, when we're pregnant, it's not just that it involves uh, having a baby. It involves hopes and dreams of how you're
Of
gonna,
course.
what are you gonna teach him,
Yeah.
her, where are you gonna go?
Yeah.
I don't know, like all these moments that you envisioned
Yep.
yourself with your child, and it's very, very hard.
Hmm.
So,
That's like what we said in the beginning. You've thought of yourself, the role that you're going to be playing, and
mhm, yeah,
you've envisioned your future and what it's going to be like, and now it's gone.
yes, yeah, and a lot of things involving that, like for example, like yourself, like what am I? Am I a mom? So,
Yeah.
so am I a mom? I'm still a mother, and you are, we are still parents of those
Hmm.
babies, even though they're not, we don't hold them in our arms, we hold them deeply in our hearts,
Right.
right? But everything that involves grief is just very, very overwhelming and very hard. So that
Yeah.
would be the first one,
Right.
the first task.
First
And then,
task, accept the
yes,
reality of the loss.
yes,
Okay.
yes. And
This.
that would be the objective for him. You have to accept this reality,
Hmm.
and and because I think that in all the support groups that I've had, I feel like, we talk about it all the time because we need to make sense of our new reality, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't have my baby, I lost my baby, and it's so hard for us to grasp that, around that just talking about it. I think the peer support groups, talking about it,
Hmm.
I think it really helps. It could really help,
For
you
sure,
know?
because I mean, you're not the only one that's been through that. And so you peer to peer,
Exactly.
you're going to find someone that's
Yeah.
probably felt the same thing that you felt. And then
Yes.
it makes you realize you're not, your feelings are very similar to probably what other people
Yeah.
have had. And
Yes.
that what you're going through, um, someone else may have been sort of on the same journey, right? So peer to peer is so important
Yes.
in this process.
Yeah. Yeah. That resonating with someone else that has
Hmm.
gone through what you've been through, especially if you have been disenfranchised by society, right?
Yeah.
It's
And I mean,
so
and
good.
and a lot of times those people have heard the same comments that you and I got,
Yeah. Yes.
and it's
Yeah.
funny because, I mean, obviously our pregnancies were years apart, but we had the same comments, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't think, I think um it's
It could happen to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so in those peer-to-peer groups, you will find this, people that'll, be like, oh yeah, they raised their hand. I heard that. I had that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. That is why it's so important to have that kind of support.
for
And
sure.
also, for the second task that it says, the second task is work through the pain
Through
and
the
grief.
Yeah.
Hmm. And that is like, oh, that sounds amazing.
Sounds
How are
so
we gonna do
easy.
that?
It sounds so easy.
Yes, yes. And grief involves, like you said, like a whole this bunch of emotions: sadness, anger, anxiety, guilt. And but this task really emphasizes the importance of allowing oneself to feel and express
Right.
these emotions, because and this is why we were talking so much about having these emotions and overwhelming. It's so important to really like leave them, you know. And I'm sad, I'm gonna be sad, and I'm happy, I'm gonna be happy, and anxious, because like what happens, and I believe this, is that when we encounter an overwhelming situation that happened to us, especially like pregnancy losses, you know, that they are so sudden, right? Like I was fine yesterday, like what happened, right? Like things could flip over in a period of hours. And I think that going through such a shocking situation, our brain has to make sense of what happened, right? And in a way, I feel like our brain also tries to protect us, you know, of what
Sure.
we're going through. So all these coping mechanisms, you know, come in, and these defense mechanisms come in too. And I think that is very important to talk about this, because when we are facing grief and pain, we often tend, you know, we could adapt to those, you know, to those feelings, and be like, okay, I'm gonna be sad, I'm gonna be happy, I'm gonna be, you know, in a room for 3 days, and I'm gonna sob, you know, the loss of my baby, and then I'm gonna be okay. But sometimes it doesn't happen this way, you know. Sometimes we try to adapt as best as we can. Sometimes we just, you know, men, for example, their coping mechanisms just work. You know, I'm just gonna work.
Yeah.
I'm gonna work a lot because I don't
Throw
want to.
myself into it. Yep.
I don't want to think about it. My wife is suffering a lot. I don't want to bring these feelings onto her. That's too much. So I'm just gonna focus on, you know, work, or I don't know, you know, going out with my friends, or gaming, probably, you know. And so, and there are a lot of, you know, coping mechanisms that at the beginning there could be like a defense mechanism or brain saying, okay, this happened, just just let's process this. Or it could really become something that we're doing on a daily basis, and it become an unhealthy behavior, right? Sometimes when you don't face these overwhelming feelings, it could come out in anger. Anger is very common, right? Like I remember that I bottle up my feelings, and then I was screaming at my daughters, you know, and I'm like, what is happening? This is not me.
Yeah.
You know. And sometimes that happens, you know, this anger comes up with your partner, your kids, your boss, whatever is around you, right? So I think that is very important to understand that coping mechanisms are really important for us, but also that we have to distinguish when can be unhealthy and when it is actually helping me moving on.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you is you know, because you know, is it hard to identify your coping mechanisms?
I think it is.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is this, and I'm going to try to say it really, really fast, but it really involves in getting to know our grieving selves. Because in life, like we have so many losses, you know, and not only losses of a deceased person, but some other losses, right? And we have to get to know, like, how have I reacted to those losses? How feelings were managed at my home? You know, how did I react to something that I didn't like, or I was suffering to? So, for example, in a home where the caregiver do not faces his what he's going on, and he just, you know, explodes with everyone around, the person that lives there is going to learn to just don't face feelings and maybe explode to anyone around, because that's what he saw. That's the normal feeling thing in your house, right? So I think that it involves a lot trying to think and be compassionate with ourselves, and be like, okay, how were your feelings handled at home? How do you handle all these losses that you've been handling in your life? You know, because we are humans. We have been through a lot of losses. We have been through pain. So how have we handled that? So once that we can become conscious of, oh my God, I think I bottle it up. Or, oh, I think I go running. Or, oh, I think I go and have and eat ice cream every time. Is that, I don't know,
Yeah.
there are a lot
Or
of
retail therapy, or you're like,
exactly,
yeah,
or seek help, or I don't know. I think I drink. I
yeah.
think I eat a lot. So
Mhm.
I think that is very like when we come when we realize how we deal with pain in our lives and losses and difficult situations, and we become conscious of that, I think that we can realize how we can make it better, so we can actually have a growth and move on effectively.
Mhm. And
And
this
I
is
am
where
not.
I was going to say, this is
Yeah.
where it's really good to find a therapist or someone
Hmm.
that you can talk to as well,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
can actually probably help you identify that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And we're talking about pain and maybe trauma here, right? So it's not
Hmm.
easy for us. So I am not coming here and just telling you how you should manage your grief. I'm really
No.
just trying to make you see and understand that we have to be compassionate to yourself, because how is my grieving self? Like, do you
Hmm.
know your grieving self? I am learning a lot about myself,
Yeah.
in
I,
this
I
in
mean,
this work.
and listening to you right now, I've been thinking like, how do I grieve? And I haven't had any losses recently in my life. So I'm,
Mhm.
because my miscarriage was over 30 years ago. So
Yeah.
I'm like you. I don't think I know what my grieving self is, like what I
Ex-
do.
Exactly. And we don't have to exactly know, but we have to know know ourselves. Like, yeah, when I'm sad, I tend to eat a lot, for example.
Oh,
No? Or
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
when I'm sad, when I'm going through something very bad, I tend to explode a lot. I have a lot of anger inside me. So,
Mm,
so I think that it's interesting just to think about that, so we can be
yeah.
conscious of that, and we know, like, is this something we want? Is this something that is helping us move on? Honor
Right.
the person that is deceased and helping us move on with it, or is it something that is totally just holding us
Holding you back.
holding us back, right? And
Yeah.
making that grief even worse.
Right.
So I think that is an important thing to think about, and I think that is
Mhm.
something that we could leave our viewers with, that, right?
Absolutely. And
Just think
and I
about
think
it.
because there's lots to talk about.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously we're going to be back next week, and you will be back next week.
Yeah.
So thank you, Laura, again, for your wisdom and, for joining me today. If you're watching today and something resonated with you, know that whatever you're feeling is valid.
Hmm.
Grief is a long journey. It's not something that you get over, but something you learn to live with in your own time and your own way. So as
Yeah.
we continue through Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, remember that you are not alone. Baby's Breath is here for you, whether you need support, a listening ear, or just the knowledge that there is a community behind you. Next week, we will continue to explore Worden's task of mourning. So if today's episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget don't forget, we will have an episode next week on Ask Me Anything. Take care of yourselves and each other.